Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. In this special edition, we're marking 4 months since protests erupted across Iran following the death of Mahsa Amini. The 22-year-old died shortly after she was arrested by the infamous morality police for improperly wearing her veil. Since last September, more than 500 people have died, including scores of children, while thousands have been arrested. But will the government's harsh crackdown crush the protest movement or merely fuel existing public anger? In a rare opportunity, our colleagues at France 2 managed to speak to several brave women.
Despite the cold, Iranians are finding ways to continue their fight for freedom. In the streets of Tehran, even this snowball fight is an act of protest. These women are outside and they're not wearing headscarves. For this, they could face up to 10 years of prison.
I don't cover my hair because I think it's the least we can do. We've made some positive changes, we're only at the beginning. I always put my headscarf around my neck so that if I feel in danger, I can cover my head because I'm scared for my family.
By talking about what is happening on the ground, Iranians are putting their lives at risk. To speak to this activist, we used a special encrypted video chat system in a Parisian lawyer's office.
We decided to change our way of protesting. The repression has been so aggressive and too many people have been dying. We have transformed the funerals of death row inmates into political platforms. We have been printing leaflets and distributing them in the streets. And if the regime asks us to do anything, we do the exact opposite.
The mock trials and executions have only fueled the anger.
We don't have time to grieve.
Every time we lose someone close to us, it makes us stronger. We're all caught up in this. We're all afraid. But there is no turning back. We believe that it will work. We know that we must overthrow the regime and go all the way.
Till the end.
You are ready to risk your life?
I'm already doing it.
The protest movement has gone far beyond women's rights. People are also angry about the dire economic situation. Even conservative women are rising up.
I don't agree with the authorities. God is not so unjust that he would punish us simply for wearing a headscarf. We must be free. A change is happening, a big change in mentalities. It's a revolution.
Authorities have intensified the deadly crackdown and have blamed protesters for the country's disastrous economic situation.
Now, Human Rights Watch has been monitoring the situation closely in Iran. Joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Tara Sepehri Far, an Iranian researcher with the NGO. Tara, thank you so much for your time. With the internet largely shut down in Iran, are you able to paint a picture for us of what the situation is like currently on the ground?
Iranian authorities are getting more sophisticated in implementing internet restrictions and localized shutdown, but we're still in touch with hundreds of human rights defenders, protesters, lawyers, and activists. And what we can tell is that street protest, as the most visible sign of the protest movement that began in September of last year, has slowed down, but individuals, celebrities, and ordinary people are still staging individual acts of resistance. And even though the street protests are not happening at the scale that they were happening a few months ago, the anger, frustration, and calls for fundamental change are at all-time loud in Iran. Authorities are also moving forward with handing down prison sentences against protesters and human rights defenders who have been arrested over the past 3 months. Our partner groups have documented more than 700 prison sentences that have been issued over the past few weeks against protesters, and prolonged prison sentences, as well as the cases of execution and death penalty that we are closely monitoring, that, and the international community is also keeping a close eye on.
What dangers do women protesters particularly face, Tara?
Women protesters, especially those who choose not to abide by the dress code as a form of resistance, face threats of arrest, harassment, violence, sexual harassment, detention, imprisonment, and also serious charges being brought against them. We have had cases of women who have chosen not to abide by the headscarf being arrested. We have had some serious charges being brought against those who've done that as an act of resistance. We are receiving numerous reports of sexual harassment during detention and at the time of arrest. And it's a very concerning situation, and there's definitely a gendered element into how authorities are treating protesters.
There are also reports of Iranians living abroad facing intimidation along with their families back in Iran. Are you able to tell us more about that?
Iranian authorities have a long-standing track record of trying to intimidate dissidents as well as journalists who are reporting outside Iran through putting pressure on their families, even arresting and summoning the family members and attempting to silence critics abroad. In recent years, we have had several cases of prominent dissidents being transferred to Iran despite their will. So this pressure is particularly high on journalists, including BBC Persian journalists and other journalists who are reporting about the protest, as well as outspoken dissidents outside the country.
And this is the first ever women's-led counter-revolution. Is it the case that the ground has shifted within Iran when it comes to women's rights? Is there no going back as such?
The protest, the widespread protest, had happened at the time that organized civil society in Iran, including the labor rights movement, teachers, and human rights defenders, were under increased pressure. What happened in Iran and what is happening in Iran brings generations and decades of social movement and struggle for greater freedom to a full circle, connecting women's autonomy and their choice to choose their dress code to the broader civil and political rights freedoms that the country has been demanding for years. So in a way, it has connected women's rights and their struggle and has put it at the center of struggle for democratic rights in Iran. And that alone is a shift forward that, regardless of where the protest movement goes, has changed the landscape in Iran. And we hear from ordinary people and individuals that for them there's no going back. Many of them are determined to keep the small ground that they have able to conquer, which is their own autonomy over their dress code, and they're determined to continue their fight even at this individual level.
Given what you've just been telling me, and despite the grim news, is there a glimmer of hope at all in terms of reforms being implemented, or is this regime determined to fight to the bitter end?
Unfortunately, we have not seen any sign of Iranian authorities being ready to concede to protesters. As a matter of fact, we have seen an increased repression over the past 2 weeks. But we're at the point, the society is at the point that the demands for greater civil, political, and social rights have reached a turning point, and there's no way out of this deadlock without implementing fundamental reform. It is up to the authorities to decide if this is the hill that they want to die on, or finally they are going to concede to the increasing demands by the society to take the path that they should have taken long time ago and grant women, half of the society, and the greater society, the right they deserve.
Tara, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Iraqi Kurdistan has increasingly become a refuge for Iranians fleeing the regime, many crossing the border to join Kurdish commandos in a bid to bring down the Iranian government. Among the exiles are women who are determined to join the fight. Our team on the ground went to meet them.
Amongst these experienced commandos are two newcomers,
18-year-old Sadia and 25-year-old Noor, who are being trained in arms. Both are Iranian and wanted by the authorities for having taken part in the protests. They arrived 2 weeks ago and have to cover their faces in front of our cameras to protect their families, who are still in Iran. In Iran, Noor was a student. She was about to go back to college when the protests began.
As a woman, I had no rights. I came here and they gave me a gun. Here I am a Peshmerga. I am here to defend the rights that I never had.
Like Noor, Sadia left her loved ones behind. It was a difficult decision with serious consequences.
They threaten my family. If they don't hand me over, they'll take my sister instead. I don't know what they would do to her if they took her. They would make her disappear.
Despite fear for the fate of their families, the girls train hard. The other, more experienced girls train tirelessly in conditions that are close to reality. One exercise follows another, and the day always ends with a patriotic song. The fighters remove the scarves from their heads as a sign of solidarity with the women of Iran.
And you can watch that reporter's item in full on France24.com. And that's all for now. You can keep up with the 51% on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. Plus you can catch our previous programs on the France 24 website. So until our next show, bye for now.